Okay, excellent. Hi, everyone. This is Film and Faith podcast. This is actually the first Film and Faith podcast we're doing. We've got a few others lined up, but I thought we'd start with you, Andy. So tell us a bit about yourself, what you do, and how you perhaps came to be interested in film and faith.
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, a real honor and privilege to be on the podcast and to be talking to you, Marinella. So my name is Andy Godfrey. I live in Milton Keynes. I'm a full-time evangelist with an organization called Outreach UK. So we basically look for people who've got the gift of telling others about Jesus. And we bring them on board into our organization. We take care of them. We train them. We provide them with literature. And I've been doing evangelistic ministry for 40 years. So that's what I do. I'm out most Sundays preaching. So if anybody wants to book me up to come to their church and preach, get in touch. I do movie quiz nights for churches, and I do street work, I do evangelism, you name it, we do it. So I've been doing this for 40 years. Um, my interest in movies stems all the way back to when I was 8 years old, a very snowy Boxing Day. My parents took me to see, my brother and I, to see for a treat a reissue of The Wizard of Oz. I'm not quite that old to
Oh, wow.
originally. And you'll remember there's a scene in The Wizard of Oz where the house crashes in Oz, and it's been in sepia tone. It's been in sort of brown and white
Yeah.
to that point in the film. And she comes out and she opens the door, and suddenly we're in Oz and it's Technicolor. And genuinely, as an 8-year-old, I can still remember seeing that for the very first time and thinking, wow, this is incredible. And that was the moment when I fell in love with cinema. So I've been in love with cinema all my life. I've been passionate about cinema. When I was a teenager, other kids were asking for bikes and things for Christmas. I was asking for the latest movie annuals and books about the making of movies. And I remember spending Boxing Days reading and studying these movie annuals that used to come out. It's all online now. And so I've been obsessed with movies for a very long time. And then about 7 years ago, uh, something happened which amazed me. I met a guy called Steve Legg. So Steve was an evangelist. He was the founder and editor of a magazine called Sorted, which was a Christian magazine for men. And Steve knew that I was obsessed with movies. We became great buddies. And he asked me to write film reviews for his publication. And Steve had really good contacts. We were getting invitations to press screenings and to sometimes to premieres. And the result of that, my childhood dream came true because I found myself sitting in rooms with other journalists watching movies. It was incredible. I remember one screening. I was only a few of us there, but it was a lady from the Daily Mail and somebody from Sky and somebody from the Sun newspaper and somebody else from the Guardian. And there's me, and they all looked at me and said, "Who are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm with Sorted magazine, the Christian magazine for men." And my dreams actually came even further true because we've now been quoted on 13 movie posters. If you'd said to me as a teenager, "What's your ambition?" I would have said, "I want to see my name on a movie poster." Andy Godfrey says this film is great. It's happened. It's happened. 13.
Excellent.
Amazing. Sadly, Steve died last year at the age of 57. He went home to heaven. Steve had a number of tumors on his brain and he suffered terribly with cancer. So we're still producing the magazine digitally, but I'm now involved with a Christian radio station called Pure 247 Radio,
Mm-hmm.
and I review movies on there, and I'm a trustee. What we do on Pure 247 Radio, we've only been on the air a couple of years, but we play pop songs, we play Christian music, but we look at the lyrics of every pop song we play, and we won't play anything that's got swearing or blasphemy or overt sexual references or references to
Yeah.
drugs. So, but we still play Taylor Swift. We still play all the latest pop songs, and we just look at the lyrics, and we won't play anything that we don't consider. The guarantee is you won't hear anything you don't want your kids to hear on our radio
Yeah.
station. But I
Mm.
review films for Pure 247. We're still getting invites to press screenings, which is great. And so my boyhood dream came true. And then, while Steve was still alive, I was talking to him and said that for many, many years, I'd wanted to write a book combining my faith in Jesus Christ, which is the driving force of my life and my main occupation and my main job is to tell people about Jesus, I wanted to write a book combining my faith in Jesus Christ with my love of movies. And Steve said, well, do it, just write it. And so last year, this was published for those watching on video. It's a book.
Oh, awesome.
It's a book called Confessions of a Christian Film Critic, Faith on Film. And basically, what I decided to do, and we talked about it, we batted it backwards and forwards for ages. Each chapter is on a different genre of movies. So we've got science fiction, musicals, Disney, Hitchcock, Bond, Christmas, horror. And we've got different genres of movies. And then we said, okay, how can we use these movies as modern day parables for the gospel? So when Jesus was here, he talked about sheep and pigs and goats and, runaway sons. I said to Steve, we need a book where we can say, this movie says this about Jesus Christ. This movie can be used as an illustration of the gospel. So we wrote the book. It's not the biggest book in the world, but it's on Amazon. And in the back of the book, we've recommended 5 movies that you could show in your church, maybe to bring in people.
Yeah.
And then we've got discussion starters, so you can have a discussion after them. So that came out last year, and one of the names on the cover, you'll see on the top, we've got a commendation.
Right.
I became very friendly over the last few years with a guy called Mark Kermode. Now, a lot
Oh,
of
yeah.
people know that name. Mark is probably the country's leading film critic.
Yeah.
And Mark and I became friends, and I actually run the Mark Kermode Appreciation Society with some other people. We've got 6,000 people on Facebook who do nothing but talk about movies all day, every day. And so when I started this, I said, right, I need to get to know Mark. And I never in my wildest dreams imagined that I would become a friend of his. I just thought I'd get to know him and say we were running this group. Mark and I become friends. And I told Mark I was writing this book about movies and faith. And he said, well, let me have a look at it. Mark's an interesting guy. Mark believes in God, but not necessarily in heaven and hell and, and hell and judgment and sin. But he had a look at it. He gave us this wonderful quote for the cover, which is a film fan's enthusiastic search for the meaning of life in movies. And whenever I'm presenting the gospel now at perhaps a movie quiz night, I use that because I've found the meaning of life. And it's not in movies. The meaning of life is in Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And in a relationship with God through faith. So Mark's quote was phenomenal. I have thanked him so. And I know of at least 20 or so non-Christians, people who have not got faith, who bought this book because Mark's name's on the cover. And of course, when I told him that, he said, well, where's my commission?
Of course, yeah.
But that book came out as well. So I am obsessed with movies. If I'm sitting in a room that's got 3,000 DVDs in it.
Well, I can see a lot of posters behind you.
Yeah, well, I
Are
got
they lots of film posters?
there are those that you can see. Actually, you can see one behind me.
Right.
Actually, Bruce Springsteen posters.
Right. Okay.
But yeah, Jaws. You can see Close Encounters on the wall there, off to the right, and there's basically it is wall-to-wall movie posters. 3,000 DVDs, 3,000 Blu-rays, 500 film soundtracks.
Wow.
So I'm kind of obsessed with movies, but I'm more obsessed with wanting to tell people about Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Yeah.
So being able to combine the two, just as I said already, a dream come true. But God has used this, and we're praying that He will. And recently I've been to 2 churches where we've done movie quiz nights. So we've done a whole evening of questions about movies and had a lot of fun, a lot of popcorn flying around. And then I bring a little epilogue at the end about using Mark's quote.
Yeah.
And we've had more people in at those 2 of those quiz nights who are not churchgoers than are churchgoers. Because people come to quizzes, people like,
yeah.
they like come and they like to test them. And I do some fairly easy questions, and I do some more difficult questions for the more serious film buff.
Yeah.
And then, as I say, I just bring the story in at the end of Jesus, and I show the trailer for the film The Greatest Story Ever Told.
Yeah.
From the 60s. It's just come out in HD.
Is that with the one with Max von Sydow?
No, this is the one. Max von Sydow, I think, was King of Kings.
Yeah. Oh, Jeffrey Hunter.
Jeffrey Hunter.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Who went on to become the first ever captain of the Starship Enterprise.
Right. Yeah, of course, he
Yeah,
was. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So MGM are just going to release The Greatest Story Ever Told on HD Blu-ray, and they produced a new trailer, and the trailer talks about, do you have faith? Do you believe? And so on. Here's the greatest story ever told. Does my job for me, you know.
Yeah,
You have faith? Do you believe? It's the greatest story ever told.
yeah, yeah.
So I'm excited. So that's what I do, and that's why I'm obsessed with movies. And
When did your journey in faith start?
oh, again in childhood,
All right.
my father was a minister of a church, a village church, part-time minister in Wiltshire on Salisbury Plain. But when I was in my teens, my dad changed job. He was working for a missionary society that were taking Bibles and other goods into communist Europe,
Wow.
which
Okay.
my dad said
Probably
was,
very dangerous.
well, humanly speaking, dad said it was stupid.
Yeah.
It was very dangerous. And they would arrive on the border, and the Iron Curtain, as it was then, and the border guard would say, have you got any Bibles? And dad would say yes, and show the guy his own personal Bible. He
Mm,
just wouldn't mention the 200 in the back of the van. Sometimes the Bibles got through, sometimes they didn't. And I grew up hearing stories of these Christians that were being persecuted for their faith. And by the way, I think there's a film to be made there one day
yeah.
of what was happening in the 60s and 70s to Christians in Eastern Europe. I mean, they were being hounded, they were being persecuted,
Mm,
churches were being bulldozed, they were being arrested, and they really were being sent to Siberia and
mm,
the rest of it. And I grew up hearing about these stories. So it was in my teens hearing about these brave people that my faith was really cemented. And believe it or not, I started preaching when I was 15 years old.
wow.
I'm now in my 60s. Uh, um, I, I've been preaching ever since. But it was hearing those stories that really got me thinking seriously about, I need to take Jesus seriously, and what
Yeah.
I'm doing for him, and what can I do for him. And what I discovered I could do for him was I can speak publicly, I can preach, and I can write. So that's how it came about. And our family was really always being challenged by my dad. Actually, at one point, and he won't mind me telling you this because he's with the Lord now. But dad at one point had a nervous breakdown, which the doctor attributed to the pressure of being in communist Europe, carrying illegal material, i.e., Bible.
Yeah.
His colleague and best friend had 4 heart attacks during those years and died of a fit.
Mm,
Um, so there was real pressure and real agony. Strangely enough, I ended up working for the same mission, but after the fall of the Iron Curtain.
yeah.
So we were running Bible colleges in Eastern Europe, and I was going in and teaching students how to preach in Bible schools in Eastern Europe. So yeah, that's where my faith journey started.
And in Eastern Europe, how did you cross over the language barrier, or was there a language barrier?
Yeah, no, there was. We had translators. We had
Okay.
one really, and we used to go to Moldova. We started a Bible school with the Baptist Union in Moldova, and my job was to go to Moldova 3 times a year, and I did that for 10 years, and lecture on evangelism and lecture on how to put a sermon together. And we had a lot of young guys and young girls in our Bible school. We were training them, and we said, "What about translator?" And we had a really lovely girl called Ivana, and Ivana, what she did was, she wasn't a Christian, but we paid her. She was the best translator we could find.
Mm-hmm.
We paid her. She read the Bible from beginning to end in English, and then she read it from beginning to end in Russian.
Wow.
Then she got somehow or other she got a one of these Bibles where one panel was in English and the
Yeah.
other panel was in Russian, and she read both through side by side, and she was phenomenal. She was absolutely incredible. So she would the Bible school, we would start lessons because it had to be intense, because the students had to go out and work, when they weren't
Mm,
full-time students. So we would start at 9 in the morning and finish at 5, and that would go on every day for 2 weeks. And I would lecture for 2 hours, and a colleague would lecture for 2 hours. She's lectured for 4 hours in that time.
mm.
And at weekends we were out preaching in churches, and she would come with us, and preach. And as far as I know, she never became a Christian, which was one of the real sadnesses that really broke my heart.
Well, sometimes I
Never know.
think people might need more time. They
Yes,
don't,
exactly.
it's just,
Yeah, you never know.
You
So,
never know.
that was good. And of course, it was interesting because a couple of times I tried to mention illustrations from films um, in the course of a lecture or something. Of course, they hadn't seen it because Western movies were barred. It wasn't
Right.
until communism really fell and Eastern Europe began to open up that they began to see Western movies, and Western culture began to infiltrate into Eastern Europe. So I was talking about films that they hadn't, and I realized very quickly I had to stop doing that. But obviously, when I'm preaching here in the UK, I will talk about films and use illustrations from films all the time. And there were some great illustrations you can get. But yeah, Eastern Europe was the language barrier was a problem, but we got there.
Mm, mm. Excellent. So I wanted to ask you, what are your, let's say, top five, but you can expand a bit, films with Christian
The
themes?
Christian message. Okay. So just to say, my favorite film of all time. And just to my left here, I have a massive poster and I have a picture of me with one of the stars. So my favorite film of all time is Raiders of the Lost Ark. Uh,
All right.
I,
Okay.
I, I remember going to see that the week it came out. And if you remember the opening scene, he gets chased by a boulder and he gets in.
Yeah.
When he's getting in the plane, I got up to walk out. Films hadn't meant to be running to. I got up to walk out genuinely, thinking, wow, that was a great movie. Oh, hang on a minute. It's still going. There's more. That set me off on a study of the Ark of the Covenant in scripture,
Yeah.
which is fascinating in itself, really fascinating. And I do use Raiders of the Lost Ark to talk about the power of God, the justice of God, and so on. So I use illustrations from that. My favorite faith-based film of all time is Risen. I've
Oh,
seen Risen.
mine too.
Yeah, I
I
love.
love that film. I
Oh,
love it.
amazing!
Yeah.
And again, when we do quiz nights, I show the trailer because the trailer is just so powerful.
Yeah.
The tagline was "Witness the greatest manhunt in history,"
Yeah.
and I just think it is absolutely a brilliant film. For those who don't know, we have a Roman soldier, Roman officer who is commissioned by Pilate, Pontius Pilate, to go and find the body of Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Because there's
Yeah.
this rumor going around that he's come back to life. He can't find the body. What he does find is Jesus. And
Yeah.
I think it is moving. It's very deeply moving. There's one scene where Jesus and this Roman officer have a conversation late at night, and Jesus quotes something that the Roman officer had said to Pilate
Yeah.
earlier in the film. I
Yeah.
know that, you know, it is, and it's deeply moving. And the end of the film, he walks away from a bar where he's had a drink, and the window there's like a cross in the window, and he's walking away and he's walking out into the world, and it's I'm going to tell the world this.
Yeah.
And I just think Risen is fantastic. So that's definitely in my top five. And in fact, there's a village church in Essex that I visit regularly. And last year they were celebrating their 100th anniversary. And we turned the church into a cinema for a day. And we screened Risen twice.
Oh, wow.
In the afternoon, we had a lot of senior citizens. And I did a little talk after it. And then we screened it again in the evening. And we served popcorn and hot dogs and pick and mix. And it just went down really, really well. So Risen would be in my top five of all time for sharing the gospel, you know. I do like another Spielberg film. I do like Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and of course E.T.
Yeah. I mean,
No,
I was gonna ask you because you picked two films that include, let's say, extraterrestrials.
right,
Um, what do you think about, because you hear a lot about Christians and people who study the Bible who refer to anyone pushing extraterrestrial narratives in a wrongful way because
yeah,
they are meant to be sort of, demons, if
yeah,
that's the
yeah.
case. What do you think about that?
Look, I don't have a problem with fantasy films.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with because we know they're fantasy.
Yeah.
Yeah, science fiction is my favorite genre, so I don't have a problem with this, because we know that they're fantasy. We know that
Mm,
they are, special effects. We know that this is a story that's been made up. We understand from scripture that human beings are unique in the universe, created by God, saved by Jesus Christ because he loves us. So we understand that. So I don't have a problem. But when E.T. came out, I lost track of and I say this in the book, I lost track of the number of children's talks I heard in churches about ET, because ET came from heaven. ET died. ET rose again. ET told us to be good, and ET went back to heaven. Remind you of anybody? And the difference is that Jesus is coming back again, and ET's never come back. So I would use sometimes films like that. Star Trek is another great favorite of mine, and Star Trek presents a very optimistic view of the future. You go back to the original TV series in the 60s, which I remember watching when it first on here. You've got a Russian and a black lady on the bridge of the Enterprise. In the 60s. What? That's that. So Star Trek presents this very optimistic view of the future. Gene Roddenberry, who created Star Trek, was actually a humanist. I mean, he didn't believe in God.
Right.
That's why there's no specific chapel. There is reference to a chapel on the Enterprise. There's one episode where two of the crew members are getting married, and somebody says, "Oh, they're down in the chapel." But Roddenberry wasn't happy because he said the human race can survive on its own. We are good enough. We are beautiful enough. We are brilliant enough. We are intelligent enough to survive without the need for God. And you can contrast that sometimes with other science fiction films like Blade Runner or the Terminator films, which say actually humanity's on a course to destroy itself. Where does the answer lies in between, where when we bring God into the equation, that's our hope, for the future. So I tend to use Star Trek quite a lot. So you asked for five, so that's Raiders and the Alien films and Star Trek. I mean, something like my favorite musical, and I think they messed the film up, but my favorite musical is Les Miserables. I love the stage show. I didn't like the film.
No, I didn't like the film either.
No.
No.
The staging of some of the songs was wrong.
Yeah.
The casting was all over the place.
Yeah.
But Les Miserables, and I know that it was used in the original Christianity Explored course. So Les Miserables is a story of redemption. It's a story of hope. It's a story of one man's soul. There's a line where Jean Valjean, our protagonist, sings, "My soul has been bought for God, saved me long ago." And Les Miserables is just such a beautiful story of hope and redemption, and one man realizing that he needs to change his life. And you can use Les Miserables in many, many ways. I mean, there are some great musicals that you can use, but I think Les Miserables is the most powerful because it has at its heart a man who's changed, a man who believes in God. And the end scene where he's dying and the ghosts of Fantine and Eponine appear and take him to heaven. I've seen Les Miserables on stage, I think 14 times.
Oh, wow.
And so, I love it. And I'm welling up every single time. I just bought a ticket to go and see it in the Symphony Hall in Birmingham next year because it's going to be doing a big tour next year. So sometimes musicals are films that you can use. My favorite director is Alfred Hitchcock, apart from itself, obviously. My favorite director is Alfred Hitchcock. And if you watch a lot of Hitchcock films, so I've got a whole chapter in the book on Hitchcock. Hitchcock made 52 films. I own 51. Film number 52 is missing. It's a 1927 film called The Mountain Eagle. We've got a few black and white grainy stills. Nobody can find it. If you find it, you'll be sitting on millions. But Hitchcock films often feature staircases.
Yeah.
So Vertigo being the obvious example, where he's going up and down the stairs of the tower. North by Northwest, there's a scene where he's at the top of the stairs looking down to the bottom of the stairs. There are every single great Hitchcock film, including Psycho, which has got a death scene on the stairs, has a scene involving a staircase. And I use the line in my book, you never know what's at the top, you don't know what's lurking at the bottom, and you don't know if you're going to meet Mrs. Bates halfway up, And I use that sometimes when I'm preaching, because, Jacob, obviously, you can talk about Jacob's ladder.
Yeah.
One's at the top, one's at the bottom. We talk as human beings about when we die, do we go up or do we go down? You know, what's waiting for us at the top, what's waiting for us at the bottom. There's a scene in the end scene of Notorious. Cary Grant is holding a glass of milk walking upstairs. Does
Yeah.
that glass have poison in it or doesn't it? It's the question we are asking ourselves as an audience. And they illuminated the glass. They put a light bulb in the glass, and
Yeah.
illuminated it as he's walking up the stairs, and everything else is dark.
Yeah.
Are we walking to the light, or are we heading down to the dark? And I have used Hitchcock films as an illustration for the gospel, and as I say, there's a whole chapter of them.
I mean, the fact that he was born and raised Catholic, I
Yeah,
remember there's a shot from I Confess with Montgomery Clift. And when he's at the point when he's really in doubt, the pressure's on that he has to give in the secret of confession, but he can't do that, obviously. And it's
yeah,
a wide shot, and it's shot through the foreground. There's a statue of Christ carrying the cross. And then at the background, it's the priest going slowly, and he's kind of thinking.
yeah.
And I thought, wow, this is.
He certainly knew how to stage a scene, didn't he? And he knew
Oh,
how
yeah.
to draw you into a scene. And I mean, the theme of Vertigo is somebody trying to change somebody else
Yeah.
into their image or what they want them to be.
Yeah.
And you're right. I Confess is just such a great film, and Hitchcock, as you say, with his Catholic um, background, and of course he had a dreadful fear of police as well.
Yeah, because his dad took him to a police station when he was 5. I always found that story. I mean, what were they thinking?
Well,
Traumatize a child.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, no wonder he was scared of authority figures and police.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but I did a whole chapter on Hitch in the book, because I think the scariest film ever made is The Birds. It still
yeah,
terrifies me to this. Any film, any horror film I've ever seen, The Birds is still the scariest. But it is this notion of going up and down. It's this notion of good and bad. It's this notion of what's waiting for us around the corner.
yeah,
And he was the master of suspense. I mean,
yeah,
genuinely, he really did know how to, you know, keep you in suspense. He said, "Don't tell people there's a bomb under the table. Show
yeah,
them the bomb, because then the audience are in suspense. Is it going to go off or isn't it?" And I just think Hitchcock was great. So I would use a Hitchcock movies in the book. I also used James Bond.
right.
um, so Scouting for Girls had the hit song "I Wish I Was James Bond Just for the Day," and so do I sometimes. I mean, wouldn't we all like to live that? Travel around the world, exotic locations, exotic food, fast cars, all the rest of it. And sometimes you think, "Oh, I'd love to be James Bond," Um, and then life isn't like that. You know,
No,
life really isn't like that. Life can be boring and dull and routine. And I've got friends who've never been abroad, let alone had a fast car or whatever, And so life for most of us is just ordinary, dull, routine. We are not. But Jesus said, "I've come to give you life and life in all its fullness." What does that mean? What did he mean by that? I think he meant that when we have a relationship with him, with God through faith in him, suddenly we realize that all that matters is God and living for him, and that he satisfies us. He
mm,
satisfies our emotional needs, our spiritual needs, and that life can be full when lived with Jesus, and that living. I have a friend here in Milton Keynes. I won't mention her by name, but she's running a coffee morning in the church. Um, Sarah's not in the greatest of health. I did mention her name. There you go. She's not in the greatest of health. She's, she, but she's so happy. She's so content. And when you talk to her, she says, "I'm content because I've got Jesus. And
yeah.
Jesus is all I need." And so, again, in the chapter in the book on James Bond movies, this is the sort of conclusion that I've drawn, that you don't have to be traveling around the world every 2 minutes, driving fast cars, sipping exotic martinis on beautiful locations. You can live a satisfying, full, happy life on a council estate in Milton Keynes.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't think James Bond was a very happy person either.
It wasn't.
You can see the tension, the stress,
Yeah.
The
If you read the books, he's a right miserable character.
yeah,
And he often, in the books, he often hates what he does for a living,
yeah,
but he's good at his job. So he's not the happiest, most content character. And again, the old idea, that you can bring out is that money and fame and riches and fast cars and big houses do not necessarily buy you happiness. You know, this is the thing. There are so many films about ordinary people, that are out there living ordinary lives, and you just want to show people that whatever your lifestyle, whoever you are, whether you're James Bond or not, or just the opposite, with Jesus, life is worth living. And of course, you've got the next life to look forward to, which will be exciting.
yeah, absolutely. I just remembered a film that I watched. I think it came out about 3 or 4 years ago called The Hidden Life.
Yes,
Did you
yes,
see that?
I did.
What did you think
I'm,
of
I'm
that?
struggling to remember the details. I've seen so many
Well,
recently.
it's about
It
this
seems-
character called I think he was called Franz
Oh
Jägerstätter.
yes, of course he was. Yes, yeah, I'm with you
Yeah,
now. Yeah, I mean, again, a really good film. Another film that shows how life is can be fulfilling when you live for God, when you get your priorities sorted out.
yeah. I
You
think
know,
that film really affected me
right?
because it was about this guy who refused to swear allegiance to Hitler,
That's right.
and he was imprisoned. And
Yeah.
for some reason at the time, I was really struggling with really expressing myself.
Okay.
There was this sort of underlying fear of saying what I really think about things. So I remember I went to see it with my husband and we walked out and I cried for about 15 minutes. And I was
Yeah.
like, why am I feeling so emotional after seeing this film? But I thought, well, this is kind of the power of film, isn't it?
Films do that to you. I mean, did you see Bonhoeffer, which
Not
came
yet.
years ago?
Haven't seen
So
Bonhoeffer
that's
yet.
one of the films from Angel Studios, who are giving us some
Yeah.
great stuff. And Bonhoeffer, of course, stood up against Hitler, uh, and in particular when Hitler was withdrawing Bibles from churches and then returning them with an 11th commandment added.
Ah,
I never
what
knew
was the
Hitler was
11th commandment then?
thou shalt obey the Führer.
Ah,
He was having the Bible
okay.
he was having the Bible reprinted.
Wow.
And
Okay.
I never knew he was doing that. And the film shows this very clearly. And a lot of people in the German church capitulated and said, fine. Bonhoeffer and others stood up and said, you can't do that. You cannot
Mm,
manipulate the word of God, and when we
yeah.
don't stand for this. And Bonhoeffer, of course, ended up being sent to a Nazi concentration camp and was hung naked um, in front of a large group of people. The film is remarkable. The performance is remarkable. So alongside the film that you just mentioned, do try and see Bonhoeffer, because I think it's it's a powerful. But stories of other people whose life. I mean, the last film I really remember sitting crying in, and there have been a few, and I get very emotional about films. But I remember watching the documentary called Amy, about Amy Winehouse,
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
and I went to the cinema to see it. And I remember sitting in my chair as the end credits were rolling, and I just had tears streaming down my face. I was crying my eyes out because I thought, what a waste. This girl has got so much talent.
Yeah.
She's so alive. She's got such energy. What a waste of a life. And they say the great die young, and Marilyn Monroe and James Dean and several others we can name all died way too young. But to look at the talent that this girl had, to be presented with it, and then to see how her life was being manipulated by others around her just for their own profit, their own greed. And I sat and I've often quoted that film when preaching, and Bonhoeffer, because saying, A, do we stand up for what's right? And secondly, how are we using our lives? Are our lives being wasted?
Mm,
And God, there is no such thing as waste with God. God takes what we do, and He can use us, and He can use our talents and our gifts and our abilities. And God doesn't waste anything. And put and I've seen over the years, been fortunate to see a number of people have their lives transformed by the power of the gospel,
mm,
and realizing that I can do something with my life that's actually worthwhile.
mm,
Rather than have it wasted. So stories of people whose lives have been wasted, who have died too young. Again, that's another way in. for using movies to share the gospel with people.
Do you think that Jesus arrives at a person's life, and before that happens, everything is planned by him anyway, even people who are not with Christ before?
Um, well, we're getting into some deeper theology here. I mean, personally, I will preach the gospel to anyone and everyone because I believe anyone and everyone can be saved. I
Mm-hmm.
believe God knows, personally, I believe God knows who are going to be saved,
Yeah,
but I don't.
yeah,
My responsibility is to preach the gospel and talk about Jesus to every single person that I can, every single person I come in contact with. On Sunday, I was preaching at a church in Southampton. There was a lady in the congregation, and while I was preaching, I noticed she was crying. And I was stood in the pulpit thinking, this sermon's not that bad. And turned out afterwards, when I got to talk to her, that she was crying because she said, well, God was speaking to me this morning. You know, she was in
mm,
her 40s. The first church, I've been a minister of 2 churches in my time. And the first church, we had a couple in their 70s who were converted in a miraculous way. So you just don't know. But I do believe God, yeah, I believe God's got plans for our lives and purposes.
yeah,
But something I've been really, and we were talking about this on Pure 247 radio the other day, something I really have come to understand for myself is that we talk about God being alongside us, but I also believe God is one step ahead of us.
mm,
So sometimes we make mistakes, we drop clangers, we get it wrong, and we come to our Father and we say, Lord, I've really messed up. You know, I mean, I've been divorced now for 20 years. Look,
mm,
I've really messed up, you know. And God says, something I've come to understand is that God, as my Father, says, yeah, and I knew you were going to mess up. I knew in advance you were going. So here's Plan B,
mm,
and Plan B may not be as good as Plan A, or it may be very different to Plan A. You know, there are certain things in my life where I know things have happened that haven't necessarily been great,
right.
but I may never have written the book if I hadn't gone down this Plan B course. I may never have met my great friend Steve Legg, and he may never have asked me to write film reviews for his magazine. You know, I might not be living in Milton Keynes right now. And I do believe that God is one step ahead of us.
Mm,
And he comes to us and he says, yeah, I knew you were going to mess up. I knew you were going to, I knew this was going to happen. I saw it coming. Don't worry. You know, I saw it coming. So here's the alternative. Here's what we'll do now. You know, and that's a great father. That's when a child comes to a father and says, Dad, I've really got this wrong. And the father says, okay, let's try and bring some good out of this.
mm,
We'll see what we can do. And for me, God is that father. And I've messed up enough times in my life to know that God always has a plan B. God always has this other route that we can go down. And the route that I've taken over the last 20 years has seen my childhood dreams come true. So I'm grateful to God for that.
mm,
And I'm grateful that he forgives and that he understands, and that, you know, when we mess up, he says, okay, what can we do with this situation? How can we bring some good out of this? He
mm,
does. And as I say, I may never have written the book, I may never have done certain things if it hadn't been for certain things that happened in my life. You know,
yeah,
it always brings good out of bad. And
yeah,
again, there are a number of films of Christians, you know, testimony films over the years where we've seen, you know, people mess up and then they come back and so on. So
yeah.
yeah.
I remember when we met, you said something that I thought was quite funny, but it's kind of true as well, which is that a lot of the times Christian films can be really naff.
Yeah, unfortunately. I mean, thankfully, thanks to people like you and some of the other people we met at the Sheffield Christian Film Festival a few weeks ago, that's changing. Thanks to people like Angel Studios,
Mm-hmm.
that's changing. I mean, The Chosen. I don't know if I mean,
I think I've seen one season of it.
I've had the
Um,
privilege of meeting a lot of the cast members of The Chosen,
all right.
including Jonathan Rumi, who plays Jesus. I got to interview him.
Mm-hmm.
And because now we get Christian films or Christian themed films that are being made by dedicated Christians who understand the culture of the day,
Yeah.
who understand what it takes to get a non-Christian to watch a Christian film.
Yeah.
We are getting, I mean, before, I go right back to the 60s and the Billy Graham Association films. They were made with the best of intentions,
Yeah.
but they were so obvious in their plotting. They were so obvious that this person was going to get to a Billy Graham. The one
Yeah.
starring Cliff Richard, I think it's called Shadow of a Doubt. The where it was so obvious where it was going, and I recently got hold of a film that affected me as a teenager called Thief in the Night, which was made in the 70s. It was about the second coming of Jesus and the rise of the Antichrist.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got a really powerful message, but it looks so dated. You look at a film even now like The Cross and the Switchblade. The Cross and the Switchblade, the story of Nicky Cruz in New York reaching gangs for Jesus Christ. Powerful film, powerful book. The film looks so dated. Somebody please update it. Somebody please remake it, because it's a story that's what you look at the film The Hiding Place, the Corrie Ten Boom story. It needs updating. Because now, how do we get, this is the same question we asked ourselves with the radio station. How do we get non-Christians listening to Christian radio? We play the
Right.
music we like. How do we
Yeah.
get non-Christians watching Christian movies? Your movie, and I'm not just saying this because I'm talking to you, but your movie, Messiah, is absolutely fantastic. I would happily show that to people who have no faith
Mm.
because of the language, because of the setting, because of the way it's filmed. But some of these films were made on the cheap. They were
Mm.
so obviously plotted. You knew that specific prayers, were going to be answered in a very specific way. And a lot of non-Christians, including my friend Mark Kermode, would say, "Oh, it wasn't an answer to prayer; it was a coincidence." But now, I think too, we are seeing Amazon have just released a series on King David,
Yes. Yes.
which is beautifully made
Mm.
and really biblical, actually. The Chosen, I think, is beautifully made and really biblical.
Well, I think they finally woke up because the
Yeah,
vast majority, I wouldn't say, I don't know how many Christians there are in the world in total, but there's a lot of them.
there's a lot of.
But even if they are not Christians, they just want to see a decent story, well told, a decent
Yeah,
drama with
yeah,
good value, with
yeah,
sort of Christian values, if you
yeah,
like. Even
yeah,
if somebody's not a Christian,
yeah. I
they
mean,
might want to see something like that. And
exactly. For me, the biggest thrill this year was the animated film King of Kings. I don't know if you've seen this.
I haven't seen it yet.
No,
I
you need to see it.
intend
So
to.
this is Charles Dickens telling the Jesus story to his son.
Oh, okay.
And Charles Dickens and his son travel back in time, as it were.
Mm,
Sort of there on the hillside, they're there on the lake, they're there at the crucifixion. And during the trial scene, they're there in the crowd when the crowd shouting, "Crucify him." And the little boy tugs on Charles Dickens' sleeve and says, "Dad, Jesus hasn't done anything wrong. Why do they want to kill him?" And he then goes all the way back to the Garden of Eden and tells him and the gospel comes through. That film, which is beautifully animated, that film hit #1 in America in the box office this
well,
year,
there you go.
and
Yeah.
it got into the top 10 here. And I saw it at a press screening, and sat next to me was a young lady, and I was talking to her before the film, and I said, "What do you do?" She said, "Oh, I buy films for Odeon." And I said, "Oh, that's interesting." So we watched the film, and at the end, I turned to her and I just said, "Well," and she said, "Yeah, we're definitely going to show this." And I said, "Is there a market for these sort of films?" And she went, "Absolutely,
Yeah, it's huge.
it's huge."
It's
And
huge.
films like Jesus Revolution in recent years, Sound of Freedom, those
Yeah.
kinds of films. And again, Angel Studios are putting out some really good, powerful stuff. Um, but she said, no, there is a definite market for this type of film. And both King of Kings and uh, The Chosen, selected episodes of The Chosen, were shown in cinemas this year, and both made the box office top 10. And a friend of mine rang me up and said, "Oh, I've just come from the Cineworld in Milton Keynes. I've just watched an episode of The Chosen." She said it was packed, Andy,
Mm,
absolutely packed. And when I got to speak to Jonathan Rumi, who plays Jesus in The Chosen, we had a lovely time together. Jonathan was saying to me that he said we pray on set, and he said we simply pray that the message will seep through without us needing to preach to people. Just presenting Jesus will be enough, you know. And he, of course, played in the film The Jesus Revolution, which starred Kelsey Grammer, about the Pentecostal revival, the charismatic revival in the early 70s in California.
Right.
Really powerful film, really powerful film. And Sound of Freedom was another one. And I'm trying to think, there's been a few more in recent years. I'm afraid I'm in my 60s, my memory. But, you know, there've been
That's
some.
no excuse.
Thank you. But, you know, we have had some good ones. I mean, one film that I would often refer to is Ben-Hur.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I mean, Ben-Hur, people forget the subtitle for Ben-Hur is A Tale of the Christ.
Yeah.
Comes up on the screen, Ben-Hur, A Tale of the Christ, not A Tale of Ben-Hur. This is a film about Jesus.
Yeah.
And I was so cross with the remake a few years ago, about 10 years ago, they came out with a remake.
Oh, yeah, there was a remake. It wasn't very
And Jesus
good.
was hardly in
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And it didn't say A Tale of the, it just said Ben-Hur. And Jesus was hardly, and it certainly didn't have that scene at the end with the blood from the cross flowing down. And
Yeah, I remember that shot. Yeah.
yeah, brilliant. And again, you know, these days with YouTube, I can show clips from movies embedded in sermons. I can do quiz nights, and I will show that as well. You know, and talk about the cross and what the cross represented. So, yeah, there have been some really good ones, but I do think some Christian films. Thankfully, times are changing. I mean, all of those films we
I'm
saw.
really glad they are changing
Yeah,
because it was just scary. I think there is an awakening going on.
yeah, definitely. I mean, we were aware in the organisation that I work for of this thing called the Quiet Revival that's happening,
Yeah.
particularly among Gen Z, you know, Gen Z. A colleague and I recently, we do street work in Dunstable, where we go down and we just hand out John's Gospels and gospel newspapers and so on. And the other couple of months ago, we were walking towards Dunstable College at lunchtime. With loads of young people milling around, and we had in our hands John's Gospels and some gospel other literature. And a young lady came up to us and she said, and I quote, "Is that stuff about Jesus?" And we went, "Yeah." And she went, "Can we have it? We're interested."
Wow.
And we spent an hour talking with these young people during their lunch break about Jesus. So what we do need films that are going to appeal to that age.
Yeah.
That are really well made, that really get the message across, that are really powerful. Films like Messiah, genuinely, and I'm not just saying that because you're on. Some of those other films that we saw at the recent Christian Film Festival, we need films like this because young people like watching films. They like going to the cinema. They're on YouTube, you know, they're on Instagram. We need to get these things out there. We need to, and I'm praying for the distribution of some of those films, including your film, that we will get them out there because there is a market, there is an interest, there is a hunger, and you've got Amazon and Netflix and other film companies saying, "Give us more Christian content." I mean, there's talk already of a sequel to The Chosen, where they might do the Book of Acts. You know,
Well, I mean, the Book of Acts is amazing. It's
it
like,
is. Apparently, Mel Gibson's going to do the Book of Acts as a sequel to the Passion of the.
well, I was actually thinking about this today. I said, what is he going to include in his film?
Yeah,
I actually contacted his people because I wanted to see if he could get me on as a second unit director on it.
wow,
Who
that would be
knows?
amazing.
I'm sort of
Oh,
trying to
no,
reach out to see because I would love to be present when he shoots that. Because I
yeah.
thought, what is he gonna do after the resurrection? It's
Get me
got to include the acts.
a set pass visit,
Yeah.
please. It yeah, I'd love that. He's got to include acts. Originally, apparently, Risen, which we talked about earlier, was supposed to be a sequel. Was originally the planned sequel for Passion of the Christ, and it never quite happened in that way.
How do you mean?
But there was talk that Risen,
Yeah.
when they originally came up with the idea of Risen, they presented it as a sequel to Passion of the Christ.
Oh, right. Okay.
But it never quite happened in that way. And we know Passion
Mm.
of the Christ was all the language, the Aramaic and Hebrew language, and all the rest of it, and subtitles.
Yeah.
I mean, Passion of the Christ. It's an
I
80.
found that really hard to watch,
Oh,
actually.
but then we would have found the crucifixion really hard to watch, wouldn't we, if we'd been there?
Yeah, I mean, it's very realistic,
Yeah.
but I think that film is absolutely brilliant. How he
Oh, I do.
depicts the
Yeah.
devil and everything about it is
Yeah.
brilliant.
I mean, Billy Graham said it was the next best thing to actually being there.
Yeah.
But so we've got that as a to look forward to, the sequel to that. And I do hope that you get some fruit from your inquiries, and that something happens for you in that regard. Because young people will watch these films. They will watch good Christian content. They will watch stuff that's well made. Uh,
Yeah.
but they're,
I
they're
mean, when I made Messiah, it was like very clear to me that because I have so much experience in the industry, I always said to myself, this has got to look $1 million. Everything about it has got to be perfect. And I have to say, I think it was a miracle, given the resources we had, that I actually managed to make the film look the way it does.
what I loved about Messiah, and I said this to you on the day, and I'd seen it before because I'd been sent a copy by the film's festival organizer. What I loved was it was grounded in reality.
Mm,
Okay, there's we're meeting a character. I don't want to give spoilers away. We're meeting a biblical character kind of thing, but the figure of the beggar, the way he talks, the language he uses, the way I thought that there was a degree of reality about this. It was gritty.
yeah.
I felt I was sitting on the street with him. There was nothing polished, about it, and I mean that in the nicest way possible. It
Mm,
felt incredibly realistic, and I think these are the kind of films that we need, um, particularly to appeal to young people. And I'm talking 15, 16, 17, 18 year olds, that they've got, they will watch this. And as I say, I would gladly show that film, your film, to anybody. Um, but we need more, and
yeah.
we do need a greater and I think too we need to get Christians praying. Since I came back um from seeing your film, I have said to everybody, and I've said in churches that I've been preaching in, let's pray for the distribution of these films.
Oh, thank you.
Let's pray they get out there. We need to mobilize Christians into, and I've reviewed them on the radio. We need to mobilize Christians into praying, into supporting, into seeing the value. You've still got some Christians who do not see the value, perhaps, of a good Christian movie because, people aren't going to watch them. Yes, they are. Yes, they are.
Yeah.
If they're well made, if they are presented well,
Yeah.
if they are, I mean, yours gripped me from the start. And if they're well made, if they're well presented, if they're well acted, and everything about them is great, people will watch them.
Yeah.
And there is still an attitude among some Christians that says, "Oh, people won't watch Christian movies." Yes, they will.
Yeah, of course.
People are watching The Chosen. It's not been
Yeah.
a big hit for nothing. It's
Mm,
not just been a big hit because Christians are watching it. So King of Kings was not number one in the American box office
mm,
for no reason. So we need to mobilize Christians. We need to somehow or other get prayer letters out there and information out there and websites out there and you know publicity out there where we are saying to Christians, please pray for people like yourself and other
mm-hmm,
Christians, and pray for the distribution of these films because we want them to be seen.
mm,
You know, and so if I can help in any way through my contacts with Christian radio, I'm going to be on UCB1 tomorrow talking about movies.
mm-hmm,
I plan to talk about your film actually, um, and some of the other films that we saw that day. And
mm-hmm,
just saying, I mean, there are several 10, 20,000 people who'd be listening tomorrow morning. Pray for the distribution of Christian movies
mm-hmm,
and pray
mm,
for Christian filmmaking and pray that Mariana might be able to get onto the set of a Passion of the Christ too.
Yeah.
Just pray about this, because the more we can mobilize Christians to pray and to support, hopefully the more God can do, the more money can come in, more films can be made,
Yeah.
and we can get talented filmmakers like yourself. I wouldn't have a clue how to go about making a film. I just sit and watch them and write about them and talk about them, and some people get bored by that, whatever. I'm just a film critic. But if we can get people to do that as Christians, I think there can be real power in that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I totally agree with you.
So do keep us posted on developments with, particularly Messiah distribution. And
Okay.
let's get the word out there that Christians, there are great Christian movies now being made.
Yeah.
Hey, let's get the church mobilized. Let's get the church having film nights.
Yeah.
Show and bring people in, serve popcorn, serve hot dogs, whatever you got to do, like we did with
Yeah.
Risen. We packed the place.
Yeah.
With Risen, we had non-Christians and people who lived in the village all their lives and never been in the building.
Yeah. Because it's like Christians aren't
Amen.
like a different species.
Exactly.
You know?
I mean, not really. We just happen to believe in the greatest story ever told.
Yeah.
And we happen to believe it's true, and we happen to know the evidence for ourselves.
I mean, before I came back to the faith, which was about 3 years ago with my film, I I used to think, oh, I used to be a bit, like have pride in my intelligence and how bright I was and how intelligent I am and stuff. And I thought, well, if I didn't really think in those terms, but now I think I probably used to think that Christians can't be very bright. It's like an echo of conversations that I was in the middle of. And then now I think I've been made more intelligent by Christ. In fact, it's not me, it's him.
Well, absolutely, but why not? I mean, this is what God does. He comes and he opens our eyes to the,
Yeah.
and Jesus said the truth will set you free.
Yeah.
And it's when you see the truth in the situation. This is
Yeah.
one reason why I loved Risen. Because when we're doing evangelism training, I always say, people say to me, "Oh, where do I start talking to non-Christians?" I would say, start with the resurrection.
Yeah.
Explain to me how a man who we know did live 2,000 years ago and his followers changed the world. If he was crucified and dead and buried, that's it. Why would they go out and proclaim he was alive? If he wasn't crucified, he died at about the age of 50 and somebody made this story up. Why would you do that? In the first early months and years of the church, hundreds of Christians went to their death proclaiming the resurrection. Paul says 500 people saw Jesus alive at one time. That
Mm.
is the most idiotic, stupid thing to say if it isn't true.
Yeah.
If that is true, it isn't true. He's telling a barefaced lie.
Yeah.
Why would you do that?
Why would you die for a lie
Why would you
also?
die for a lie? Exactly. And I
Yeah.
always say to people, start with the resurrection and work back. And actually, if you look at the sermons in the book of Acts, they tend to focus more on the resurrection than they do on the cross. Because then they work backwards. Okay,
Right.
right, but why did so if he's alive, he died. Why did he have to die? He had to die for our sins. And New Testament preaching is very much heavy emphasis on the resurrection. And to me, and I always say to non-Christians when I'm talking to them, I meet up with my members of my film group. Mark Como does a monthly show in London once a month, and there's a group of us that go, and we meet up for a pizza beforehand. And there's one lad in the group who's always asking me questions about the Bible, always asking me questions about my faith. Recently asked me, "Is Donald Trump the Antichrist?" Which is a good question.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, why not?
Why not? So we'll think about. But he's always asking questions. But I always say, look, just explain to me how Jesus became the most influential figure in history. Just explain it to me. Before Christ, after God, before the Christian era, after the Christian era. Millions of buildings around the world in the name of Jesus Christ. This man who never wrote a book, never left his own country. No serious historian denies that there was a person called Jesus Christ.
Mm.
Why do you make this up? And he just looks at me and I say, well, Graham, this is the answer. because Jesus rose again from the dead. He would have been buried and forgotten, or might have been a footnote in history. He only had 100. There's only 150 people in the upper room when he dies.
Mm.
Where's the 5,000 that he fed, and everybody else? And Paul says there were 500. So 650, 700 at most. But it changed the world.
Yeah.
Why? It's ridiculous, unless he really did come back to life, unless they were proclaiming what they had seen.
Yeah.
And I love the verse in the Bible, we proclaim and see what we know to be true.
Yeah.
We know it to be true. And
Mm.
the gospel makes sense.
Yeah.
To me, one of the things that I always say when I'm preaching, and I've been an evangelist now for 40 years, I always say to non-Christians, the gospel makes sense. Just stop and think about it for a moment. And the resurrection makes sense. And but a loving God wouldn't throw anybody into hell, says my friend Mark Commode. No, we throw ourselves into hell when we're
Yeah, exactly.
offer of heaven,
Yeah.
And so, but if we can get that message out through film, be it biblical films.
Yeah.
I mean, there was even one last year, I don't know if you came across it, called The Book of Clarence, which
I
was,
have heard of it.
yeah, it was a sort of fantasy. It was about Thomas's younger brother,
Right.
the apostle, who doesn't believe that Jesus is the Messiah. And it was a long, convoluted thing. I was never sure that it was meant to be a comedy or taken seriously or whatever. It's worth checking out just to see. Sometimes these films are worth checking out just to see what Hollywood is saying about Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you. That's one reason I quite like watching. I will go to watch a horror movie.
Yeah, I
Because
was going to ask about that.
I want to see
How are you for time? Can you do another 10 minutes?
we can do another 10 minutes, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Well,
Yeah, horror and faith. Well,
okay.
how does that
So
work?
when I was writing the book, Mark Kermode's favorite film of all time is The Exorcist. He
Right.
says it's the greatest movie ever made. It's not, but he says it. We humour Mark, okay, and he's made documentaries about it and so on and so forth. When I was writing the book, Mark said to me, "Andy, why do Christians have problems with horror movies?" So I said, "What do you mean, Mark?" So he said, "What I want you to do is this." He said, "I want you to go away and I want you to watch The Exorcist." I'd seen it before. He said, "I want you to watch The Exorcist." And they said, "Bring me up and tell me what the message of that film is." So I watched it. I rang him up. And I said, "Mark, the message of that film is that the power of Christ is stronger than the power of the devil. The power of Christ compels the devil. Love, the message of that film is that love and self-sacrifice beats the devil." And he said, "What's your problem then?" And so very often, horror films of that nature they remind me, and I've got lots of friends who go and see them, lots of people on my Facebook page go and see them. They remind me that God is stronger than the devil.
Mm.
And there are stories in the Bible. People will not go and watch, Christians will go, "Oh, a film about demon possession." Hang on a minute, there are loads of stories in the Bible about people who are demon possessed.
Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
we not read those? Do we ignore those? Do we say, "Oh, that's too horrific, I'm not going to read that passage in the Bible," and skip over it? And to me, a horror film of that nature, 99.9% of the time, finishes with God conquering the devil, with good
Yeah.
beating bad, with love beating hate.
Mm.
And I can use them, and I did write a chapter on this in the book. I didn't always agree with everything that the campaign of Mary Whitehouse said back in the 70s. But one thing she did say was that she'd seen everything she criticised. And sometimes we want to have a go at things and we haven't watched them. And that
Yeah.
Mark challenged me to watch The Exorcist, which I had seen before. And I think that these films can remind us that God conquers the devil, that good is always stronger. There's a film called The Devil's Advocate.
I've seen that. Yeah, I've seen that.
So if you know that film, Al Pacino plays the devil in and his son is Keanu Reeves.
Yeah.
Do you remember there's a line right at the end of the film where Al Pacino playing the devil is trying to persuade his son Keanu Reeves to join him?
Yeah.
And Keanu Reeves has this line, and I punched the air, genuinely. He says, "Haven't you read the book, Dad? We lose." obviously referring to the Bible. But I punched, yeah, haven't you read the book, Dad? We lose.
Mm,
That line is doing my job for me
yeah.
because it's saying the devil loses,
Mm,
you know? And I just thought, wow, whoever wrote that line, phenomenal.
mm,
So human beings like to be scared. This is why we queue up for roller coasters
mm.
and things. And I don't like you will never see me within a million miles of a roller coaster. Okay. But the
What?
next horror film that comes out, I will go and see it because A, I can talk about it and review it, and I need to. B, I can then talk to people who've seen it,
Mm,
and I can say, well, that film really taught me a lesson. That film reminded me that if my faith and trust is in God, there's nothing stronger than the love and the power of God.
mm.
Not even the hatred and the power of the devil. There's nothing stronger, there's nothing better. So I do not say to people, go and watch horror films. I do not say to Christians, go and watch horror films because a lot of them can't handle them. You know,
Yeah. Well, it depends on the horror film
it depends on the
also.
horror film. Okay.
Because
And
there's a what's
we're
called
talking,
torture porn going
yeah,
on.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and slasher and all the
Yeah,
rest of
yeah.
it. Yeah,
Mm,
we're talking supernatural,
yeah.
demonic possession. I mean, there's been a whole series of films under the banner of The Conjuring, which were films about paranormal investigators in America who were Christians. They were Roman Catholics who investigated the paranormal. There was one this year out called The Last Rites. And a lot of that stuff was exaggerated. A lot of the stuff in the films was really made up,
Mm,
you know. And there was one featuring on the last one was based on a court case where somebody claimed was a multiple murder and they claimed the devil made me do it. I was demon possessed and the devil made me do it, and they were investigating that. Um, but perhaps, the book's called Confessions of a Christian Film Critic. Perhaps my confession is I'll go and watch a horror movie, but I will see in it the love, the power of God to
mm,
conquer evil. And when I am talking to members of my film group who've also seen it, I say, well, didn't you get the message, lads? Here's the message. And this is the message of the Bible. And I was talking recently with a Christian friend who said, oh, demon possession, horrific. And I said, well, don't you read those passages in the Bible then about demon possession where Jesus drove demons out of people, And should they not be included in films on the life of Christ? Those incidents, because it's horrific, we shouldn't be talking about it. And I get into some hot water about it, and every now and again I get criticised, and that's fine.
mm.
I take that on board. It's not a problem. But I just feel that we need to remember that the message of those kind of films very often is that the power of Christ compels the power.
Yeah. I mean, even
I mean,
at
The
the
Exorcist
time,
is not a good film anyway.
which one?
The Exorcist is not a good film anyway.
Ah,
Sorry, Mark, but it is. It's
it's very well made though,
for the time.
for the time. But
For the,
there's an interview with
I'm not
Billy.
sure it holds up.
There's an interview with Billy Friedkin about it
Right?
at the
Yes.
time, and he talks about the Gospels, and
Yes. Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
like quite.
Quite
I mean,
evangelical.
I don't think he was. I think he was Jewish. I don't think he was a
Yeah.
Christian.
Well,
But
the first thing you see when you watch the film is based on the true story.
yeah,
I mean, this was based on the true story. So, and a lot of these films are. I mean, there was a film called The Exorcism of Emily Rose,
yeah,
which was based on a true story. But again, one of the problems is, I think, that these films do get exaggerated and drawn out
well, it's for
for
to
entertainment purposes.
it's exactly it's to thrill, to provoke a
Yeah.
reaction, and
Yeah.
yeah,
But what I always want to say to people is the power and the love and the sacrifice of Christ is the strongest, most potent force in the universe and beats the devil hands down every day.
amen.
That's what I want to say to people.
Excellent. Well, that's a great time to stop then.
Thank
I'm
you.
just gonna quit the recording, and but I'll keep talking to you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for coming on, Andy.
My
And
pleasure anytime.
anytime. Excellent. All right.